Then, what the hell is this guy? I got. I wonder if I can play Nickelback on this. Where's it? Chords. Photograph? Hope they don't come in.
I'm gonna lighten you up right off the bat. So the first topic of discussion today is we could talk about how much you love Nickelback. What do you think?
I don't know if we should post that. You were just waiting to spool that one.
I was. I'm like, man. I was like, I gotta talk about Nickelback.
It's a fond memory of growing up in the Keys.
A little closer on it, yeah.
It's
growing up with the Keys,
It's
yeah.
a fond memory of growing up in the Keys, and our neighbor, who always took me fishing, was always had it playing. He had a pool table in the garage in his house.
Did he have a half shirt, cut off sleeves?
Probably did. I actually, now that you mention it, I think he
and
did.
a mullet?
He didn't have a mullet. No.
All right.
No.
Yeah, I'm just messing with you.
Is it inappropriate? I was gonna make a Gainesville joke. I'm a Knoll,
I'm a Knoll too.
Oh, okay,
rip! He's a Hurricane, so
you can make fun of the Gators. Go ahead.
Yeah, we can. Everyone can make fun of the Gators on this show. That's
I
all
have
good.
to admit, though, I can tolerate the Gators more than the Hurricanes. You guys
Yeah,
are
the fans
Really?
are kind of bad.
the fans are horrible.
What's that?
Canes fans are horrible.
Canes fans are more aggressive. I feel like Florida fans are just annoying as shit. I just can't stand them. I don't know. They're just really annoying to me.
Oh,
Florida fans.
yeah.
Was Florida State super annoying to you guys when we were like in our Jameis Winston
years?
Yeah.
Because
I tried not to be like that.
Yeah.
But then again, we were silenced by Jameis's antics.
Yeah.
Crab legs.
The funny thing is with the Jameis Winston, like everyone tried to like poke fun, you know what I mean, during the whole. It's all justified, and I was basically took the stance of I just need him to win games. I really don't care what he does in his free time. It's pretty much how I look at like most like athletes, And I'm like, you're on the field. You're never going to come to my house for dinner, or date my daughter. Hopefully not, that kind of thing. So I really don't. But I don't know. I guess I'm torn because then the more like I have friends that are professional athletes and stuff like that, then that does change my mind a little bit on it. But for the most part, it's a form of entertainment for me. I really don't take it so personally.
I was talking to somebody yesterday, I won't name any names, that's friends with a Florida Panthers defenseman.
Mm-hmm.
And we were talking about hockey.
Former or current?
Current. And we were talking about hockey, and I don't know, for anybody that follows hockey or follows the Florida Panthers, the season was just underwhelming as far as a big disappointment in how it ended. Now the Islanders
I was so bummed, man.
But the Islanders are kicking butt, you
Yeah.
know, and it doesn't make you feel as bad, but you can still see the inadequacies of the team, and it starts on the defensive side. So I was giving him my grievances with certain defensive players, and I'm like, that guy, he's a bum. Yeah, that guy is terrible. He goes, oh, he's not that bad, it's just we lack leadership and this and that. And then he ended up going on to tell me that he was pretty good friends with this guy, and I kind of felt bad for trashing his buddy, but he texted me last night to mess around with me. You know this guy, by the way.
Okay.
He texted me last night to mess around with me. He says, "Oh, I'm gonna have this guy. This guy's gonna be calling you tomorrow to get your feedback." And I'm like, I thought I took it seriously at first.
funny.
I'm like, I don't need this hockey player calling me all pissed off, and I got to now somehow figure out how to give him feedback on hockey. Like I told
Is he
him,
going to call you?
I doubt it. I think he was just messing with me. But
You never know. If it's the friend I think you're talking about, it might happen.
that's what I'm worried about. So I think I'm gonna get a random call, and it's gonna be like, yeah, this is that guy. Remember?
Yeah.
I won't mention any names. There's worse defensemen on.
Like he's going to show up at your doorstep and like pull your shirt over the back of your head.
He's like, buddy, we don't even have to drop the gloves. There's no
Yeah,
gloves
he's going
right
to go
now.
like this, start going like this. Shake his gloves off. So I'm going to formally introduce you here, right? We are here today with Mike Lambrechts, and I'll introduce you in a couple of ways. First of all, as the Broward Chapter president for the CCA, but also Florida native, Florida State Seminole, entrepreneurial business owner, Mike Lambrechts. Incredibly, dashingly handsome Mike Lambrechts.
Well, that's
for those that aren't watching on YouTube and only listening on Spotify.
That's how I know you're lying when you got to that point. But
there you go. No, man, nothing but truth here today. So thanks for coming to the show, man. So
thanks for having me.
Connected by Water, presented by Joey Accardi, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram. If you're in the market for a truck, vehicle, Jeep, car, Chrysler, Hemi, those ones that go real fast, the Chargers and Challengers, go see the fine folks at Joey Accardi. Go see Dean. Go see anyone from the sales staff can help you. They're kind, courteous, and knowledgeable, and they want you to have a good time when you're purchasing your vehicle. I also want to give a plug and a shout out once again to our good friends at the FFMD, the Fishing for Muscular Dystrophy crew. They have their raffle up. We wrapped the truck, the golf cart, and the Everglades Bay boat, and we like to think they look beautiful. And you can go on ffmdraffle.org and make your donation. Don't do it to get the truck. Do it to donate to the cause, because they are fine people. And, it's an amazing organization. It's run by amazing people, really is. I can't say that enough. So please support that organization. And please support the CCA, right? And if you're in Broward like we are, support the Broward Chapter. Go to meetings, give your support, donate items, give money. They need it more now than ever, especially with COVID. A big part of the platform are the events, and a lot of those are getting postponed because of obvious reasons. So, unfortunately, that is happening. We are going to go blast and lead off with the fact that Mike texted me this morning a picture of the water behind the Southport Raw Bar, close to 17th Street Causeway, and we had another sewer line break today, right?
Don't know the exact details of it yet, but the pictures are pretty damning. And they look quite familiar for Fort Lauderdale residents or anybody that's been following what's been going on environmentally as it relates to the waterways in Fort Lauderdale. It's a familiar scene, unfortunately. And it's just, you just wish it would stop.
Kind of like COVID.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, and it's behind a great restaurant. And, Lord knows that the restaurants don't need any more challenges during these times. So I'm confident that they'll get it worked out and they'll get it fixed. But I think it just continues to lead to the fact that Florida has a lot of problems. This is not just a city of Fort Lauderdale issue. This is a Miami issue, as we've just seen in Biscayne Bay.
It's a big Miami issue right now.
This is an issue all over Florida. We've heard things from the West Coast, from Tampa. We've heard things from Sarasota area. We've heard things all over the state, and so and it's not even the coastal areas as much as it is the interior of Florida as well, north of the lake. In many cases, with the septic system. So Florida's got a lot of work to do to upgrade and replace infrastructure, so we can protect our precious waterways. And that goes without saying that Fort Lauderdale has the same challenge ahead of it too, and they've expeditiously been replacing some main sewer pipes in some of the areas of concern that have been breaking in the Rio Vista area, and this is obviously another one that they're going to have to do, and it's just a start. I mean, it's just a start. So we hope that the city gets on it quickly, and that we get to continuing to move forward to find ways to remediate emergencies like this, and find ways to upgrade the infrastructure and find ways to improve the environment structurally, as far as finding ways to plant mangroves and improving the quality of the actual water so we can support more oyster growth and get those natural filtration organisms back en masse like they used to be. So we have a lot of work to do.
You mentioned septic there briefly, and I know I'd be remiss not to give a shout out to House Representative Chip LaMarca for all the work that he's done in eliminating septic in Broward, except for like one little area, I think in Lauderdale by the Sea, that still is kind of on septic. But we bring up on the show, we brought it up a few times, about, Florida being like a new frontier of America, and how it was like one of the last developed states in the Union. And, reasons why were pretty obvious. There's a lot of swamplands who didn't have the technology to kind of develop it down here. Mosquitoes, alligators, restless natives, and the fact that, conventional air conditioning wasn't really a thing. And in fact, the guy that invented air conditioning as we know it today is a Floridian, of course, like for the entire world. A Floridian invented air conditioning.
How could you live without it?
Right. So I think what we're seeing now is somewhat of I don't want to say backlash, but just a result of infrastructure that just needs to be updated throughout the entire state, because it was all developed in mostly like the 50s and the 60s and the 70s. And it's like, well, now it's starting to get old.
Right.
But budgets are like, oh, we don't need to put that money there. We're going to put the money here because we're growing, and we're expanding. It's like, well, before you expand, like, and I'll quote Chip again, he's like, well, what are you going to do? Like when you have a house, right, and you need a new roof or you need to replace all the plumbing. Well, you can't see the plumbing, so you're going to replace the roof, right? So that's kind of where we're at. Like all these little towns around the state need to kind of look at Fort Lauderdale and just be like, hey, take note. This is going to happen to you too. So
I think Jeff Maggio has made that a big statement for his cause and his vision. Is It's not just a Fort Lauderdale thing, or that we should learn from the large cities like Fort Lauderdale around the state and be more proactive instead of reactive. And so to your point, the state has grown exponentially, and we just have not planned and have not spent and invested in the infrastructure. And to a politician, I can understand that a sewer pipe or water pipe may not be the sexiest of things to put in. Maybe a park would look better, or more development, allowing people to come here. So, I could understand how it can be easy to oversee some of the more important things that lie under the surface. But at the end of the day, and it's funny, I was reading a little bit last night, Brian Mast, he sits on the infrastructure committee, and he's like, well, it's not the sexiest of committees to sit on, but it's important. And so I think it's good that it's unfortunate, obviously, that all of the problems that we have, that they've come to light and that we haven't planned better for them over the years. But this is a compounding effect of decades of development and pollution and things that have gone unchecked. And, at some point we knew these issues would come to roost, and they come home to roost, and they have. And I think that we have the right, we're certainly getting the right people in place, the right politicians in place. I think DeSantis has done a phenomenal job very quickly with understanding and jumping on these issues. That was part of his campaign, and he's been following through on that. And I can tell you with certainty that I know that the city of Fort Lauderdale, the leadership does care a lot about the waterways, and having people like Jeff Maggio and having his podcast, and having people like you and your podcast, and conservationists and activists and all these people who care so much, having a voice out there, and also guiding the politicians and the leaders to helping them understand the gravity of the issues that we have. And having Jeff get these guys out on a boat, I mean, is huge, and the fact that these guys went and did that, I think it really opened their eyes quite a bit. And, to their credit, they're not Jeff Maggios, they're not fishermen, they're not big boaters, I don't even know if any of them live on the water. It's not their fault. We've just got to do a better job and make sure that we're educating them and making them aware of how big of a deal this is. And I think that process and that philosophy is starting to shift a little bit, especially in Fort Lauderdale. And it's a big topic. It's become very popular.
You covered a lot of bases right there. And the first one I want to kind of react to is Jeff. Jeff's done an amazing job recently, especially. with all the work that he's done. I mean, he's been on the show. He's a friend of the studio. We have a running joke about bulk trash. So he's upset that out in Fort Lauderdale he gets it like once a month.
Right.
Right. But out in Coral Springs we get it every week. So every week.
How much trash do you guys have?
Well, so we went on a run where we were like, like emptying a bunch of stuff out of the house, and we had like, stuff from other people to the point where it's just like my sister in like one town over doesn't get it, so she'll put stuff on my curb.
So is this kind of an invitation that I can start?
Sure, no problem. You want to make the drive out to the Everglades and put your trash on my front yard?
You'd be
that's
surprised
fine.
how far people will go to put their trash on.
Every Monday I'll take a picture of it and I text it to Jeff. Here you go. It's Sunday night. It's Sunday night again, right? So anyway, he made a video of his latest heap and send it to me.
That's one thing. If there's something that irks or bothers Jeff in the least bit, there could be a podcast or a video or something. He's going live about it. Something's going to happen. Totally.
So shout out to Jeff Maggio for the Lunker Dog podcast. So
phenomenal.
It's definitely I don't know if I want to call it like a sister podcast or a brother podcast, but we do work together, and you know what I mean. We have the same goal, so we're kind of like locked in together and stuff like that.
And to your point, he's been a great CCA supporter. He donates trips. He gets involved. He's very generous with the organization. He gets behind the things that we're doing, the advocacy and some of the habitat work and whatnot. He's just he's been a great supporter. So it really helps organizations like CCA having people with a voice like Jeff.
Right.
And yourself, obviously, behind it.
Yeah, so it was cool because when he came on the episode, that's when we really started getting into that whole thing about how the other towns are going to, kind of see this happening to them. So, and we're going to be working with Jeff on some of these new initiatives too. So we're excited about that. The other thing I wanted to kind of respond to too that you brought up was obviously Ron DeSantis, because we talk about him on the show, like, I want to I should probably get a Ron DeSantis bobblehead on the table or something at some point.
Popular guy.
Yeah. But, Brian Mast has done an outstanding job since he came into office with all the work that he's done, with the clean water initiatives, the stuff he's done with Captains for Clean Water, and just Lake Okeechobee initiatives and Everglades initiatives. And recently he had a bill with the Army Corps of Engineers, can you elaborate on some of the stuff that happened there?
He's got a bill out there that's still pending vote, and essentially what it does is it will restrict the Army Corps from discharging toxic water that's above a certain measurement of toxicity into the estuary. So basically, instead of that water going to the estuaries, it has to either sit or they've got to move it south through the glades. And so with Florida, the natural flow of water all along has always been south through the Everglades, into the Everglades National Park, through Florida Bay. And with all the development, Army Corps started changing that around, and now we have this really dynamic infrastructure system of drainage, because we've got to figure out a way to move water around in all these developments like Coral Springs that used to be Everglades, and used to be marshland, and now we've got to figure out how to route that water and push it places and move it so we don't flood our communities. And so, we obviously can continue with development. So it's been a real challenge, and I think that guys like Brian Mast have been phenomenal leaders in helping to not only draft legislation, but also to help people understand how important, and help government understand how important it is to move water and direct water in the places that it should be going, because a lot of that water is toxic, and when directed to the wrong place can just do horrible things with algae blooms and are very, very destructive. And so, again, we saw an example of that in Biscayne Bay, is when you have that excess level of nutrient, how it can really just rob all of the dissolved oxygen out of the water. And just like us as humans, if we don't have oxygen, we can't breathe. Fish breathe oxygen essentially, but it's dissolved within the water. So without that, they're not living. The fact that I saw pictures of lobsters floating really says a lot because they're pretty hardy. They
Yeah,
can
insane.
go a long time without oxygen.
Right.
So that just
They
goes
survive
to show.
a nuclear war, right?
Yeah, but I mean that cockroaches, right?
Right. Exactly.
So it was just it was really just eye opening to see that happen. And again, it's these are problems that have happened time and time again, and it's a lot of it is the way and where water is flowing and what's in the water. And if we're restricting this water from getting to places when it's at a toxic level, we're doing a lot of good. But we've also got to figure out ways to clean this water, because a lot of time you could flush it, but if it gets flushed in areas, I mean, it'll just go on a killing spree and it can kill anything on its way to wherever it's going. I mean, even, the glades are naturally a system to filter water.
Right. It's one big filter.
But, water can still get past the glades and still get into areas and estuaries and communities that, the glades won't do a perfect job of cleaning it up and filtering it. But that's essentially what they are. I mean, the glades are not designed to handle the amount of fertilizers that are in it and other excess nutrients that come from sewage, come from, alkalinity from construction, from concrete. I mean, there's all sorts of
runoff.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So there's all sorts of things that naturally, I mean, it's not equipped to really handle. So we've got to, as humans, as folks that are developing, we've got to come up with solutions to be able to neutralize the effects that we're putting on the environment as humans.
Mm-hmm. And another thing too, like you think about like small things that people can do. One of the things too is if you're going to redo your driveway, redo it as pavers.
Yep.
Because the water goes into the ground at that point and it doesn't run down your driveway and go into the street and go into your gutter and run off into the waterways.
Right. Yeah. It's just things like that, and it's developers figuring out a way to not wash concrete down the storm drains. We know the storm drains, especially in Fort Lauderdale and other coastal communities, they drain into the waterways and super toxic. We've seen just so many instances of contractors and landscapers blowing grass into the water, dumping coconuts, dumping, any kind of vegetation, which when it dies, it's full of nutrient. It releases that. It becomes toxic. A lot of people don't realize that we can just dump it in the water and it goes away. It's not how it works. So I know that the city of Fort Lauderdale is working on, has an ordinance out there to restrict or eliminate fertilizing during the summer season when it's the most rainy, when you have the most runoff. It's a start, but it's all about this philosophy that we've got to change in people, that you can't just dump whatever you want into the water. You have to really think twice about what you're doing when you're working around the water, no matter what it is. And so, I mean, you go out to the sandbar and look at the people throwing beer bottles and water bottles and all the plastic that's floating around.
Plastic's a huge issue. Mylar balloons are a huge issue. Like, you're having a birthday party, I'm sorry if you're in the Mylar balloon industry, but, I'm not going to support it.
Yeah, you got to. I mean, those got to go away, because it's just like you talk to the airboat guys that are out in the glades all the time. All they do is pick up balloons. I mean, I hunt in the glades. We duck hunt out there, and you see them all the time. And people just release them, and they go up in the air, and they're, oh, well, out of sight, out of mind. Just like everything else, we put it in the water, in the air, whatever. It's out of sight, out of mind. Not my problem anymore. And it's just a philosophy. Again, people come here from different parts of the country, and they don't respect the resource. And so it's, again, like I'll keep. And really the person who introduced me to this word and this concept, I mean, it made so much sense, was Jeff. And Jeff always continues to speak about philosophy and how we're thinking about things. And it's an advocacy effort. It's an education effort. And I don't think we'll ever be perfect. But again, as long as we continue to get more people to talk about these things, get more people to think about these things, I think we can make a big difference. But on the other side of it, we're also going to have to continue to figure out ways to manually clean the waters as well, because I don't know if it'll ever be perfect where you're ever,
It's never going to be perfect. We're human.
Exactly.
Exactly. It's never going to be perfect. And, I always have to make it clear in the show whenever we talk about environmental issues, it's like, we're not asking people to become environmentalists, which I think the term has been bastardized over the years. It's just like, it's incorrectly being represented at the moment, right? Like, you can be an environmentalist just in mindset, like you're saying, in philosophy, just by taking personal responsibility for yourself And whether you want to call it a carbon footprint or whatever you're leaving behind, whether it's too much plastic or mylar balloons or whatever, just take a little bit more personal responsibility. Be mindful of the fact that you're living in a state that's connected by water, right? And completely. And wherever you put on the ground, you can count on the fact that that's going into the water. Like, eventually it will become runoff and find its way there. Like, water always finds its way, right?
Absolutely.
So what we are as conservationists, right? We're really trying to establish solid practices and principles for, just taking care of your land and, for now and for the future. Is it going to be perfect? Absolutely not. We're still going to have to install programs and initiatives to keep things clean. But, we can really just be mindful of the fact that, look around you and recognize where you live, please.
Exactly.
This is not your typical state.
And you know how much that cost? It's free.
Right.
It's free. So it doesn't cost, it's not going to cost you any more in taxes. There's not going to be any surcharges or fines or anything for you just to do the right thing and just think twice about what you're doing before you do it. And again, I think it's education. People just don't really know that blowing grass into the canal can have some significant ramifications. So,
right. They think natural resource to natural resource, and it's not the case.
Yeah, what can it hurt, right?
Right. Exactly. And, another thing too is the fact that, we're searching for balance, not extremism.
Exactly.
That's got to be cleared up too. It's
right. Right. I mean, people look at CCA and they're like, oh, they're, they're tree huggers, they don't kill any fish, you can't catch any fish, you can't touch any fish, and it's like that couldn't actually be the furthest. That's like the furthest thing away essentially from what CCA is.
Right.
We're about harvesting the resource in a smart, wise, manageable way to where, and also defending our right to do it legislatively. So a lot of people don't realize that. And I know like Captains for Clean Water, for example, they do a ton of advocacy work. And there's always more that's needed. And so having organizations like that, having organizations like CCA, it's so important. And it doesn't matter, in my opinion, we all have our different philosophies and our different ways of doing things. And so to me, it doesn't matter what organization you support, but I think what irks me the most and what drives me the craziest is watching people on Facebook and social media, and all they seem to do is post, and they complain and they trash the politicians, and they'll trash the conservation organizations, and they'll trash just about anybody that they can. But that'll be the last person that you'll ever see out doing something in the community, or donating to an organization or joining an organization, which if you want to volunteer for anything, by the way, that doesn't cost you a cent of your money to volunteer. It costs you your time, which can be argued as money. Okay. But at the same time, there's no hard cost to it. So it would be just great to see more people doing things instead of talking about them, because the more we talk about them, the less gets done. And these organizations, they don't, the other thing is too, they don't run on hopes and dreams. I mean, they run on finances. People have to support them. If you cannot give your time, and certainly try to give some money to help represent the organization that represents you. And so that's my biggest thing with people is just, I think that there's more that everybody can do. And, CCA only has so much power as an organization. We're 20,000 members. We could be 30,000 members, 50,000 members. We could be 100,000 members, but that's still not the power of 1 million people in Florida, or 2 million people, or whatever that number is that we can get to of people that are out there doing these things and advocating and talking about it. I think can just make such a difference.
Yeah, we definitely believe in the organization. We've been involved with it. I don't even know how long at this point. I've probably been doing stuff with the CCA maybe for like the past 8-9 years. But it's always like whenever you go to a banquet, there's always education, being spoken about. There's always, money being raised, obviously, but they're showing you where the money's going. and the work that the organization is doing, which I think is very important, rather than just being, I don't want to call out any names from any other, organizations, but there are some organizations, some high-level organizations out there that people just blindly donate to, that because they got a name associated with a cause, and they're just like, all right, there you go, but you don't really know necessarily where that money's going to. But I believe CCA is one of those organizations that, are coming up with programs and doing things and putting the money to use. So one of the programs that we started too, or you started, was just to discover or do some more investigation on the oyster research in our local area, which I think is highly important. They have their STAR program, which is a very cool program, and there's a give back to members on that one too. So it is an organization where it's got community involvement. So it's outstanding. Please support the CCA is my point.
Yeah, I mean, and you hit the nail on the head, is that the money that people donate, I mean, there is physical proof of where that's going and what that's doing. I mean, between the habitat projects that the state does, for example, since 2010, CCA leveraged, basically they took 800,000 since 2010, they took 800,000 of their own money, which comes from, you guessed it, people like you, people like myself that donate, other folks that donate. They took that 800,000 and they leveraged it to 4.8 million of habitat projects around the state. So CCA invested 800,000, and basically by matches and other donations, we've been able to use that to create 4.8 million. I'm an investment advisor for a living, and to make 4.8 million off 800,000 amount of time, that's a pretty good return.
Right.
And
it's a well-managed organization.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And they just do the right thing. Our habitat director, Frank Guidis, has just he's worked tirelessly. I don't know how the guy does it. And the amount of work that they've done in the habitat side has just been phenomenal, between the oyster recycling program, the redfish releases. I mean, it's not necessarily habitat, but restocking fish populations with Duke Energy. We did the Indian River Lagoon clam project with Blair Wiggins. That was a really, really big deal. The Fort Lauderdale oyster study is another one. South Palm is about to deploy an artificial reef of their own. Peter Accardi is a great guy over there. Kai Vera, they've done just a phenomenal job in South Palm in that chapter. I'm helping them out with that project. And then obviously in Broward, we've done the John Michael Baker Memorial Reef. We've done 3 phases of that. So it just, I think that with these organizations, my philosophy has always been that showing people and displaying to people, not only on the advocacy side and where their money is going, but also doing projects in their own backyard. I don't think there's any better way of showcasing what you do as an organization than leveraging your assets and your funding and doing projects and just doing things. I think a lot of things happen behind the scenes that people don't see. Again, we have advocacy that goes on in Tallahassee on a daily basis. We have full-time staff for that. But those are the things that the intangibles and things that you don't see. So, I personally, I'm one of the vice presidents for CCA Florida. I'm purely a volunteer. I'm on the management committee as well. And we are the ones that make the decisions for how money gets allocated within the organization, how things get spent. So as a volunteer, which I give my own money and my own time to, and a lot of it, I get to see how, and I get to be in charge of how that gets deployed. And so I feel like there's no better way to really understand an organization and to feel good about an organization than to see firsthand behind the scenes how the money gets spent. And I can tell you unequivocally that CCA is extremely conscious of the way that they spend money, and they leverage every cent that they can to the hilt to make the most sense for the organization and for the environment. And I would tell you the other thing is too, the employees that are hired by CCA are not in it for the money. They could go out and
they work very hard,
and they work their tails off.
They travel a lot. They go all over to do these events.
They work their tails off.
I know that from firsthand from working with them, because those are normally the people that I work with when I get involved in. It's from doing the featured artist stuff. But I know for a fact they work very hard in getting all that together.
And the passion they have for what they do is just, there's no way to describe it.
Yeah.
And it just, when I got involved with Broward, I was like, okay, let's see what this organization is all about. And I got a little bit further in. I'm like, okay, I think we can, we have some visions. We can do things here in Broward. And then I got a little bit more involved. And the more you do and the more you get involved, I feel like the more you really begin to appreciate what the organization is and what they do, and just how phenomenal the culture is within the organization. So, again, having Connected by Water and yourself, supporting this organization is a big deal for us, and we really appreciate it.
Yeah, no, I mean, of course. I mean, it's our pleasure and honor to do so. All the things you mentioned are what really makes the CCA a sustainable organization too, which, putting money in the right places and putting together these programs and putting together these events really kind of keeps the wheels turning, because it's not just about that blanket term, raising awareness, right? Which a lot of 501c3s or organizations will just really hang their hat on that term. If you don't take action, at the end of the day, then really you're just telling a bunch of people about what they should be doing.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
So, and that's one of the things I admire about the organization. One of the many things. So I wanted to bring up a topic with you, though. And I'm not asking for CCA's stance, right? So I don't want to, have anyone have to put their foot in their mouth or whatever like that. But we've had on the show, we always have, Art Sapp, Captain Art Sapp, and Captain Skip Dana on the show all the time. They're regulars on the show.
Highest of quality people too.
We're honored to have them. We're really be so involved with Connected by Water. But one of the recent topics that we've been talking about a lot is sharking. And we have brought in Patrick Price a couple weeks ago from Jensen Beach, who is the captain of the Daymaker Charters. He started that Facebook organization, Let's Tax the Taxman. It's an ongoing topic on the show. It's not just like we're going to do one episode on it and then drop it, right? It's like we're ongoing. John and I talked about this morning about some other projects we're going to be doing to promote some of the initiatives and some of the organizations, which I'm not going to mention yet because, bridges haven't been crossed on it yet, but there have been talks with other organizations that they're in full support of what we got going on with that. It comes down to what I said earlier about we're searching for balance. I just want to kind of make a clear statement that we're not asking people to kill all the sharks and get rid of them so we can catch our fish. But, there are certain things happening that we're under investigation by us to trying to quell that issue. So, I mean, you've had some experience with some sharking issues, right?
Yeah. I mean, we were just looking at that immaculate, gorgeous, and I don't even know how it's not done yet, wahoo painting that you've got going. And it just reminds me of all the wahoo fishing we've done over the last 8-9 years, probably in the Bahamas, all over the Bahamas. And, when the fish get real schooled up, and how we're constantly getting sharked, and unfortunately hooking some of these huge tigers and bull sharks that are eating these wahoos. And these sharks, they're relentless. It's amazing. You just stop, you hook up and you stop, and as soon as you stop the boat, there's sharks already at the transom.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's unbelievable. It seems to get worse every year. It's something that we talk about all the time. I think as fishermen, we talk about it amongst each other about the sharks and how the sharks have been such a problem. I think the conversation only continues to increase year by year. I mean, I don't have any scientific evidence or data of what's going on with the sharks, but anecdotally, you talk to enough people and you know that there's a problem. Like I said, there could be a number of different reasons for it. But it's certainly a problem. I think something needs to be done about it, because I don't know if we have any increase in fishermen or increase in fish populations or anything that's making the sharks act differently. I think it's definitely worth investigating, and it seems to me, again, from my travels and my experiences, that there are more sharks than there have ever been before, especially in the Bahamas, and you can't kill sharks over there. So there's no real way to keep that population in check. I can't tell you how many times I've been hearing now what seems more and more, we're hearing people get bit over in the Bahamas, when they're free diving.
They're starting to hear the rubber band get pulled back.
I don't even think
they're
it's
arching their backs and they're like, "Oh, that sounds like food to me."
I think it's the boat stopping.
The boat.
I mean, I think it's like even before somebody even gets in the water. I mean, they can hear. You know, you watch any of the National Geographic shows or Shark Week or anything like that. I mean, you learn a little bit about how sensitive their sensory receptors are and how far away things can be, and they know that they're there. And it's like, yeah, you don't see them, but they're around. And I certainly won't be the first to state it, but it's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
It's a problem.
Yeah, some of the all right. So I'm not pointing fingers really, but I kind of am. But not really pointing fingers, because I mean I don't have like unequivocal proof of this. But some of the people that have been brought up are a lot of these dive tours, the shark dive tours, and they'll make their noises and hear their props and go to the same spots every time, and the sharks are trained to be in these areas. Yep. And they're not 100% to blame. We love our dive community, so I'm not saying that, I want you to stop doing what you're doing. It's just that things need to be analyzed. Like, is this the reason why? Because, and also there's been some recent regulations of some sharks that used to be able to catch that, you're not able to catch, and some of the regulations that have been put on commercial fishermen are now, we're seeing the problems that are arising from not regulating, some of that, So, TBD on a lot of the stuff that we're doing here at Connected by Water with the Taxman Group and with other organizations. So that's just
it's
an ongoing thing right now.
It's something absolutely worth exploring, I think, because of the attention it's getting now and everybody talking about it. And now finally you could think of it, it's somewhat formalized with a group now that's on Facebook, and there's active conversation about it in that setting. I would hope that we can figure out a way to establish some science behind it and understand better about those behaviors. Knowing what we know about sharks, I mean, they're pretty sharp animals. I could certainly see that case could be made for those behaviors being created by divers, by us feeding them. And it's almost the same thing as like why you shouldn't feed alligators. Mm-hmm. Because when alligators get comfortable around people, they come around more, then somebody's liable to get bit. Yep.
You see those videos of alligators coming up into people's homes, and they're looking for food, man.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's like for the same reason you shouldn't be feeding the alligators.
Great.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't be feeding the sharks. And the other thing is that they're sharks, they're animals. I don't know if they can make that connection between food and people and have that sensitivity to know that you can't literally bite the hand that feeds you. Mm-hmm. And knowing that hooked fish equates to a free meal, and being concentrated in these areas. And so I watched something on TV a while ago that was a study about yellowfin tuna and sharks, and basically how I think this was like around the Galapagos, but how the sharks keyed in so quickly to a hooked tuna because they can't catch them on their own. Essentially, they really can't. They're not fast enough. Mm-hmm. And so the only real way to do that is by predating on an injured fish, on a sick fish, on a hooked fish. But I certainly think the conversation is worth having, and further investigation needs to be had to determine a little bit more and make some legislative changes if that's possible, or some regulatory changes on how we manage that population, because it's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, and if it wasn't happening to everybody, which it is, you know what I mean, we probably wouldn't really be talking about it. Right. Like, and also too, what's the point of putting regulations on pelagic species if like 7 out of every tuna you're going to bring up are getting bit in half, right? Which it's that bad, right? No, it doesn't happen every day, but there are days like that. You know what I mean? I just went fishing. I just brought the family down to fish in the backcountry down in the Keys this past weekend, right? First of all, you talked about simple things you can do for little snapper. Maybe you don't grab them. Maybe use a de-hooker. Right. If you don't have to grab a fish, don't grab a fish. Right. You know what I mean? And you could just de-hook that thing off, and it goes off on its merry way, right? But what I want to talk about was with Charles Hertel, who's going to be on the show in a couple of weeks. took a run with Nick Stanzik to go fishing for Cubera snapper. And they had a highly successful trip hooking them. Right. But I
landing.
I think out of like,
that's a key word. Hooking.
I think on some ad, I think out of like 15 of them, they were only able to bring like 3 in the boat.
That's crazy.
Because the rest of them were getting sharked.
That can't be good for the sustainability of
the
species too, you know?
Yeah.
So like, let's think of it from the other side. If again, as fishermen, we have the right to go out and fish, catch fish that we want. We feel the species of whatever it would be, Cubera snappers, mangrove snappers, mutton snappers, is a good healthy population and we can continue fishing it with limits. Well, if, half of them are getting taxed by the tax man, then that means that we have to hook more fish and catch more fish to get our limit, and thus more fish are getting killed.
Correct.
So that's another way to look at it from that perspective.
Yeah, so that's, I think, ultimately what everyone's kind of getting at in the fishing industry. It's like we're wasting here, But I don't know, man. So again, I'm not trying to put the CCA in the spot with any of that stuff. Like they're going to have their own stance on it, or maybe they won't even have a stance on it. But
Well, when people come and talk to me about these things, I mean, this is what we need to be having these conversations, and I can bring it back to CCA and find out if we can take a stance or if we have an opinion on that. Because again, I think people look to these organizations for their expertise to provide some feedback and an opinion. And obviously our members want to be represented as well. And many of our members, I'm sure, we're all having that same conversation. So it's something that I'll bring back to the organization, see what their thoughts are.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. You bring up the reefs, the artificial reefs. I want to really kind of get into that with you a little bit because I know you do a ton of work on that level. And also there's other projects too going on that our good friend Bruce Marks has going on with the bug shoal and all that. Yep. And they've made a ton of progress on that. And I know, we're asking for CCA financing today, but also they could also use financing to see the rest of that project see through. So, but it's all for a common goal. So that's why I'm kind of bringing it up. You know what I mean?
Right.
So he's got great work there. You guys have great work up here in this way. Take me through how you start one of these projects, if you want to.
With a vision, with a dream, and that's really all it is. I think if you have a vision and it's a realistic vision, you can do it pretty much, as long as you're obviously conforming to the regulatory standards that are set by DERM, FDEP, Army Corps, et cetera. These are all regulatory bodies that we have to deal with to be able to deploy an artificial reef. What we're lucky with is in Broward County, there's a division that specifically works with artificial reefs. And so they've acquired a permit that's it's a giant box basically off of Fort Lauderdale that has been pre-permitted by Army Corps, FDEP, DERM. And so we are able to work within that huge box under the guidance of Broward County. And so Broward County has just done a phenomenal job with us. So basically to answer your question, you start with what you want to do. You got to figure out a budget because money's everything, as we know. I've been seeing Bruce just do a phenomenal job raising money for what he's doing down there. CCA has contributed to his efforts as well down there. And we continue to support what he's doing, but if you don't have money, you got to go find it.
Yeah. So
either you're going to look for a grant, which is what CCA South Palm has done. What CCA has done basically all over Florida is look for grants. There's a lot of things that can be applied for out there. If you can raise the money privately, you can do it that way. But basically once you figure out what your budget is and when you figure out what you want to do, whether that be a shipwreck or whether that be limestone boulder, or you want to do concrete modules, which is what we did. We had a bunch of concrete culvert boxes and culvert piping donated by a concrete company here that were things that didn't work out or were never delivered, or and so those were donated to us, and then basically we put together the logistics of how they get deployed, working with the environmental and regulatory authorities figuring out the logistics of delivery, and once you deliver the concrete, where it's going to go, how it's going to get on the ship, you have to hire a crane to be able to show up and lift those items onto the ship. Ship's got to leave the dock. You have to have divers. We coordinate with industrial divers, who have communications underwater, and as these things are being dropped through the water column, you have divers on the bottom to unhook it. They also report back to the ship to make moves in certain areas. So what we have in Broward is a very unique and sophisticated vessel that we use in the Go America, the Geis offshore ship. And basically, it's a ship that has a system called DP1 system, which is dynamic positioning. And so they use gyros, they use GPS and compass, and all of these different items to be able and thrusters to be able to position the ship, with a computer on the most specific GPS coordinate that you can essentially apply to it within feet. This thing can position and drop, and so we're putting every module specifically, strategically in certain places, and so they're not touching each other. They're just far enough away from each other. So once we get that module near the bottom, the divers say, move west 3 feet. And we can literally jog west.
Wow, it's that precise?
Oh, it's very precise.
Wow.
Very, very precise.
And so it takes into account the current and everything? And
takes into account the current, wind. We've deployed...
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, we've deployed in 2 to 4 foot seas with a pretty heavy north current. Anything rougher than that probably just gets a little bit too dicey.
Right.
But the ship's 150 feet. In fact, it's the same type of ship that was used in the same company that recovered Bob and Doug from SpaceX in the capsule. So I don't know if
really?
you were watching. So if you were watching the recovery of the capsule,
like that shouldn't have been there.
Right? Yeah, that was a whole nother thing. I can't believe that happened. That's a whole nother discussion.
Yeah.
I cannot believe that happened. But basically, that same exact ship, it was a dynamic positioning, a DP1 ship, operated and owned by Geis Offshore, and with some of the same crew that we use here in Broward and Fort Lauderdale, recovered the capsule. And then they put it onto the deck, and they have this whole system. They have that they do that work with SpaceX. So it's highly specialized work. We're really lucky to have them. They do work for the Navy here, and they also do other work with submarines. They do submarine deployments and testing those submarines. On the private side, Brownies Global Logistics does a lot. They have with their sub program. So they do a lot of work here, and so we're lucky to have a relationship with them, because we can basically grab an off day that they have, that they're just sitting at the dock, and we can grab them and be able to utilize that ship for that. And it's funny, industrial divers, they called it an artificial reef making machine. So normally what you would do is you would use a barge and a crane, and that barge they have helix anchoring systems. And, they have excavators or equipment on there, and then they drop it down that way while they're anchored. And so sometimes they have to adjust anchorage and things like that. But this ship can do it all on the fly without having to be anchored. So it's a really, really nice tool that we're able to use. And so, like, to your point, again, is like how this whole process goes. I mean, it probably takes a full month or two to kind of work all the logistics out and get everything handled. And then, again, depending on what you want to do, there's different things. Again, if you wanted to sink a ship, like a ship to sink is way more expensive than putting concrete down. Concrete, essentially, if it's clean, it's already prepped. There's not anything that really needs to be done. A ship, you can go and buy a ship or get a ship donated, but that whole ship has to be stripped to the bone. I mean, it has to be stripped perfectly. And that's, generally those projects are a minimum of like $150,000. They're very, very expensive. With a dynamic boulder concrete job, you're looking at probably less than a third of the cost. So you can get a lot more done with less money, but I mean, ships are exciting and fun too. So it just again, it
big boom and explosion.
Yeah, it just comes down to what your budget is and what you want to do. Right. But there's ways to there's ways to do it relatively inexpensively. I think people are surprised by how inexpensively we can do it, and we've gotten really good in Broward at doing it. And the Go America, they weren't doing any of this work beforehand, and now all of a sudden, they're getting really good at it too. So it's been a lot of fun. It really has been a lot of fun, and we're using that same ship to do a deployment in South Palm as well when they do theirs. So it's great to have that ship we can use through the Tri-County area, probably even further north. Cruises at 10 knots, so it's pretty mobile. It's very efficient, so we're really lucky to have them.
One of the reasons I really wanted you to go through all that stuff is to just kind of like put your money where your mouth is, or put your mouth where your money is, kind of thing, and just like tell people that's why you need money. You know what I mean? Because none of that happens, without people getting paid, or equipment getting paid for, or you know what I mean. People's time is money, and this is where the money goes if you're going to do a project like that. So it's like that's what I'm getting at before with like, action, not just raising awareness, and all these things. You just went granularly telling us about all the different aspects of a project like that.
That was at a pretty high level too.
Yeah, that's what I mean. Exactly. You're not going to get into like, all the dicey stuff, but it's, you have to talk at the high level about it anyway for anyone to kind of understand really clearly what you're talking about. Because I'm sure you could get in the scientific aspects that are just, or mechanical aspects or engineering aspects that'll just,
I knew nothing about it beforehand, and after doing a few of them, I'm a finance guy. Like, I'm not an engineer.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not a marine biologist.
Yeah, but when you got to pay for everything, you want to know what you're paying for.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
And, when it comes to being hands-on, like I have to be there. I need to know everything that's going on because, again, I'm representing the funding that organizations are donating to us, like the John Michael Baker Foundation. I'm representing CCA. We got to make sure that the job is done right and that we understand everything that's going into the job. And we're really lucky. Again, our contractors that we work with are phenomenal. They give us pricing considerations because of the organization. They love CCA in general. So the contractors are also not in it for the, all in it for the money. They're in it because they also want to do the right thing. So,
well, that's something. Even though people are getting paid, that's a good point to bring up because they're getting basically their time covered,
right?
That, or like just getting base coverage, just to be like, okay, just so everything's kind of paid for on our end, we'll gladly support the organization. Right. So even though money is going to individual people, it's still not what they should be taking for a job like that.
Not at all. I mean, you think about 150 foot a supply, not a supply vessel, but a deployment vessel, essentially, with the technology that vessel has, and the size and scope of it, the fuel burn and the oil and the all the things that go into it. I mean, we all know how much it is just to maintain a 20 foot or a 25 foot boat. I mean, now think about a 150 foot boat. So these things are massively expensive to run and to operate, and the fact that they're able to be flexible with us is really, really helpful. But that doesn't mean that it's free. That means that they help us a little bit. But,
and gas still costs money.
Oh my gosh, Right. So so there's just so much that go into it, and when you add up all these pieces, the divers also cost a big chunk of that. That's really, really specialized work. They help us out a little bit too. They've been wonderful. So there's so many different parties involved, and there's so many different things that are going on to coordinate and to get schedules right and to worry about the weather. And and then also with the family that donates money, you want them to be a part of it too. Right. So you got to figure out how to get them to be around their schedule as well. So it's challenging, but again, I'm a volunteer. I think CCA is a grassroots organization. Right. CCA started purely grassroots, meaning that it was just people that were going out there doing things. It's like our oyster study, it was me and a couple other folks that were going home, house to house, by people that called us and wanted to get involved. And, we went house to house putting these oyster catches in. I went for probably 5 weeks every day after I left the office. Spent an hour, probably 2 hours, doing, taking observations, measurements, putting these oyster catchers in the water, talking to the homeowners, helping people understand why we're doing it and how it's working and what to expect from it. CCA is not going to send a paid employee down from the state to come and do it because that's not what they do. CCA was built on volunteering. It's built on people donating either money or it's donating products or services. You know, and so people always ask, you know, when things happen, where's CCA? Where are the conservationists? You know, okay, well, where are you?
Right.
What are you doing? And I said this, I brought this up before. Where are you? I mean, we, you know, people are always, it's amazing because people are always offering to volunteer. Hey, let me know what I can do. You know, would love to do. And you shoot me an email. Hey, we could use some help here. Well, you know, I don't really have the time, but you should do this. You know, you should do whatever this project is. Oh, that sounds like a great idea, Dennis.
Yeah.
Why don't you be the leader of that project? Oh, well, I don't have the time. I don't really have the time, Mike. I'm sorry. Like, so, you know.
Because it's a community goal.
Yeah.
Is really what it comes down to.
Yeah. So it just is it's about the manpower. It's about every single person putting in something. It doesn't matter what it is. Put your time, put your money, put something in, other than your opinion on Facebook. Yeah. And if you put your opinion in on Facebook and you're in you know, you're on the front lines too, then you know, I think your opinion may mean a little bit more. But obviously everybody's entitled to their opinion, but it's just frustrating because, you know, there's so many opinions out there, but so few people are willing to actually get up and do something about it or open their checkbook and voice their, you know, their support in that respect. So,
and that's, you know, your time is valuable too. So you don't always have to write a check, right? Just to the point you're making right there. So if you're typing and you're passionate on social media, please just, you know, put your time where your mouth is too.
It's join a committee. I mean, and like I said, it's not even just about CCA. It's about any organization that you feel like is the right one for you, is the right fit, you're passionate about, whatever that cause is, whatever that organization is. That's the only way that these organizations are going to be stronger is by power and numbers. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you know, we're still all connected by water. Right. So how are we all as a community going to get together and address all these things and put our boots on the ground and get the job done?
Right, exactly. And I want to kind of segue to all the reef projects and all the different things we do. None of it amounts to a hill of beans if we can't keep our water clean. Right. So I want to kind of segue where we started back to Fort Lauderdale, Miami right now with our bloom issues and the things that are going on. Were you recently on that boat trip with the commissioner and Jeff the other day?
I was not on the trip, but...
because I thought that was a pretty important thing that Jeff did.
Super important.
And John.
Super important.
I give a shout out to John, even though he probably doesn't want me to talk about him. But I'm going to shout out to John anyway.
Yeah. I was there via him.
So, but I think it's important for the commissioner to really kind of see firsthand, you know, a lot of the things that are really going on and some of the testing that has been happening. It's not been favorable. Of the quality of the water right now is in dire straits. So I really don't want to mince words when I say that. It's a problem. Yeah. It's a big, big problem that needs to be addressed like ASAP.
Needed to be addressed 10, 20 years ago, you know?
Yeah, but I mean, we're at critical mass kind of thing right now. It's like, you know, it's not only just for fishing. It's, you know, it's for the health of our people. You know, the water is bad. Yeah, and all the work that we've done, because, you know, just a couple of years ago, you see all these drawings and stuff and these memes on Facebook about Lake O and, you know, the Caloosahatchee and the St. Lucie River and and then guys like Brian Mast come in and this is, and Ron DeSantis and nothing for nothing, but this is what modern conservative leadership has done for this state, right? But down here in Broward and Miami, boom, 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 boom. All these sewers are popping. Mm-hmm. We have another issue. Still not done, right? The work is still not done. Yep. Like, even though we made great improvements in the state, great improvements for the Everglades, President Trump has put in a massive budget for us to be able to address these problems, right? Because of the work that Ron DeSantis does with them. You know, DeSantis has been criticized for being a Trump puppet. You know what I mean? Say whatever you want. Right. The dude's got the ear of the president. And he's brought a lot of money into the state to fix these problems. Right. So say what you will about that, right? But we still have a problem here in Broward and Miami that needs to be addressed, like right now. So you're telling me that the mayor is where in his mind for this, the mayor of Fort Lauderdale?
The mayor has adopted the mindset that we all have. I think it's taken education.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so it's taken, again, like I mentioned before, it's taken the Jeff.
And I'm not trying to bash the guy. I just want to know.
I think it's taken education, and it's taken that philosophy like Jeff has always talked about, and it's taken that trip out there to really see it for himself. And to really understand what people have been talking about. I think it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to see it. So I thought that was a really, really smart move by Jeff. And I think it really worked. And I really, really do feel, I've had discussions with the mayor and several commissioners. I really do feel like they do care, and they're looking for solutions. They're looking for more guidance, and I do feel like they are listening, and I think that's a big change since even a year ago or 2 years ago. And unfortunately, to have unprecedented sewage spills to the tune of, hundreds of millions of gallons, I mean, just completely unprecedented. For that to happen, for not only, I think, our leadership to really get behind our waterways, but to also raise, the awareness in public opinion. Mm-hmm. All of a sudden now these things happen, especially happen in people's backyards, and all of a sudden now, now people really understand it. And and I think that's a fault of everybody, that we did not push harder, for things to happen, or make the public more aware about what's going on, or put more science behind it. And again, it's unfortunate that we've had to go through all of this, and we may continue to, obviously today, this is not over.
Right.
I think we're going to continue to have challenges for the next decade or two.
Yeah.
But I do really strongly feel like the leadership has been educated, is aware about these things now, and they've adopted, I think, a much more supportive mindset in understanding what our problems are, and looking for shovel-ready things to do to fix them. Now, on the other hand, COVID has not helped our state situation financially or locally at all, given that our state depends on tourism as a revenue stream. We don't have state income taxes here. We have sales taxes, but a lot of that revenue for the state comes from tourism. So I can't even begin to imagine what those conversations are looking like when it comes to budgeting. And that goes with Fort Lauderdale as well. So this COVID thing has not helped us financially at all, as far as appropriating and allocating money to these specific issues. Now, that should not be an excuse, and we need to do more to find sources of funding to do things. And I think that has to come from the very top, from the federal government. And I'm personally still really hoping that we get a state and local government some sort of stimulus or funding, and they get that worked out, because states like Florida and cities like Fort Lauderdale really, really need it, because it's crushed our revenue.
Yeah. That is, the COVID thing is a big factor in it, and I'm not trying to point fingers by bringing up the mayor of Fort Lauderdale. I'm really not, right? Because I don't think this is a situation where pointing fingers is really going to matter. That's
the first place that people are going to look to, is that as all the way at the top, right? Yeah. So I mean,
it's not going to matter, though.
It's understandable.
Yeah, but it's not going to fix anything, right? So all we have to do is just recognize that we have a big problem, and how are we going to fix it? Let's move forward. Right. Now, from this point on, if nothing happens and a bunch of people sitting on their hands, then you can start pointing fingers like, hey, you're not, But it's just like anyone working in the field, or doing a job. It's like, hey, we're all working here. How come you're not work or leave? Right. You know what I mean? That's kind of the way I see it at this point. But the sewage breaks are direct, relationship to a lot of these blooms, right? Wouldn't you think?
We've had pretty bad algae blooms of not blue-green algae, but it's a different type of algae that kind of grows along the bottom, and as the water heats up, it floats up to the top. And so we've seen this nasty muck that's been floating around. And so I don't know, I don't think that we can right now tie a scientific study to it, but I think it's a safe assumption that because we have excess nutrient in our water, and nutrient sounds like a good thing, but when it's at incredibly high levels, it's toxic. It's extremely bad. And so we have this excessive level of nutrient in the water, that a lot of that can be from sewage. Again, can be from all the things that we talked about. and fertilizers and so on and so forth. But it causes these algae blooms. And when these algae blooms happen, they suck up all the dissolved oxygen in the water, and it's like a chain reaction. Mm-hmm. And so, a lot of this algae can be toxic, and it's just nasty to deal with. And so, that was my biggest concern really after these sewage spills was all of this kind of excess sewage and toxicity laying around, what that would do when the water really heated up. I mean, I was out, looking at oyster patties yesterday at some people's docks, and the water temperatures on the surface and the interior parts of Fort Lauderdale, Los Olas House, is 94 degrees, mm-hmm. boiling hot.
Wow.
And that doesn't spell good for anything as it relates to algae. And you can see it. The mayor saw it when he was on his trip. Commissioner Glassman saw it when he was on his trip, and with Jeff. And so it's not going to get any better until we stem the excess nutrient, or we're able to pull that out of the water in the areas that are real bad, especially in the stagnant areas that don't have as much tidal flow. Mm-hmm. People think, okay, well, because it's an open area and it is subjected to tidal flow, they think that water gets replaced every day or every tide cycle. But the fact is that maybe 50% of it may get moved or replaced, but there's still a large percentage of that volume, a large volume of that water that sits there. Mm-hmm. So it just, it's a compounding problem. So we need to figure out how to be able to help the environment kind of heal itself in these areas instead of flush these areas out, so to speak, and filter them out. And in general, you just see it from observations. You go to areas like Harbor Beach, anything that's closer to the inlet, that water is much higher in salinity, means it's getting replaced a lot more. I mean, you look around docks, there's a lot more oysters, a lot more life there. The water just looks a lot better.
I was going to say, as you start getting down closer to Sunrise, Oakland Commercial, it's probably more of an issue.
It's not, it's interesting. You would think that, but it's not as much of an issue as you get down to Sunrise, and even as much up to Oakland as it is when you go up the river and you go west. Mm-hmm. That's where the issues are.
Yeah.
And that kind of logically makes sense as well. And these are my observations, with the scientific twist on it because of the oyster study. We have 100 of these patties out in 86 different sites, all around Fort Lauderdale. So I've seen how, these things have grown and how they've colonized from areas like Harbor Beach, which are right by the inlet, to areas that are way up the river that are subjected to the most freshwater flow and the most toxicity, because a lot of that fresh water is runoff, or it's coming from developed areas that, again, have that alkalinity from concrete, or they have the fertilizers in it, or even residual sewage in it or whatnot. So the water further up the river is just in pretty bad shape. And you can tell that just based on how the oysters, how they grow, or the lack of growth, so to speak, in these areas that are further up the river. Now, as you get outside of the river and you get into the intercoastal system, salinity is much higher. The water's a lot cleaner. The oyster growth's a lot better. And like, we even have a site up by Sunrise at the Bonnet House, which has a lot of natural mangrove and a lot of natural shoreline around it. And the oyster patty actually looks in pretty good shape there. I mean, there's pretty good growth there.
Okay, good.
And it's nice to see FWC is getting behind what we're doing. We may end up sending some to them for observation of the organisms that are on there. But yeah, in general, I mean, the areas that you would think are the worst areas have kind of proven to be that. Those are the hot spots, so to speak, and not in a good way.
Right.
So it's been really, really interesting. But at the same time, it's encouraging too, because we know they can still grow. We know they want to grow. We know they're still all over the place. We just have to give them help. We have to help the environment repair itself a little bit so it can fix itself almost on its own. But I mean, until all this stops and until we're able to clean these waters a little bit more and get these levels back into a healthy balance, they're not going to do that themselves. But there's still plenty of growth in a lot of areas. Really surprised me.
Yeah. And first of all, shout out to the Bonnet House. They celebrated their 100-year anniversary this year. So in the people that kind of very much a family
great people
staff over there that runs that show, and really, really good-hearted people. So I wanted to give them a shout out. That's good work, Mike.
A lot of sweat.
Yeah.
A lot of sweat.
I mean, that's, that's good work. I mean, it really is. And, and I just think it's important to bring a guy like you on to just kind of tell people, like, while you're going every day to your corporate job and coming home and watching Netflix every night, there's people out there that are actually making things like this happen for the greater good, and, stewards of our community that are working hard to really, make Florida a better place to live and, just keep it intact or make it flourish. And, it takes a lot of sweat, takes a lot of money, it takes a lot of time. But more importantly, it takes a lot of heart, which you definitely have a huge one. As from speaking from fellow Florida native, we're proud of you.
Thank you.
So, and all the work that you've been doing. So it really does mean a lot. I probably speak for John on that too. We didn't design and develop the show for on a whim, you know what I mean? There is passion behind it from what we were trying to do here too. And, and just hearing that just, makes you feel good that, that there's someone out there kind of moving things forward like that.
Anybody can do it. If I can do it, anybody can do it.
You think that though, but you're wired a little bit differently than anybody, but anybody can help.
That's,
You know what I mean? Anybody can be a helper.
That's exactly what it is. And that's what I've been saying the entire time is like anybody can help. It doesn't feel like you're doing a whole lot. And even as many hundreds or thousands of hours I feel like I've spent on all these things, I mean, I feel like I've made the tiniest dent, in what we really need to do. But that just goes to show how much is needed from everybody. And, we've got to pioneer new technologies. We've got to pave paths to have more science involved. We've got to learn more about our waterways. We've got to learn more about what's affecting certain areas, and from that we can begin to really remediate and really improve a lot of the damage that we've caused over decades and decades. Again, like we said, this doesn't happen overnight, and so again, it's going to take a lot more than me, and it's going to take a lot more than CCA, and it's going to take a lot more than you and Jeff. But when you begin to put all of these people together, and then you add more of them, our influence and our utility becomes more and more and more.
Yeah.
And so now's the time for us to continue this and take this momentum and continue to build on it and get other people involved in what we're doing, and get more people to call us and text us and email us and message us and say, how can we get involved? How can we help? Because when I first started, people ask me all the time, and I didn't really know. I didn't really know. I didn't know how people, how do I volunteer? And that was my biggest thing, is like, we weren't really doing a whole lot on the habitat side. We weren't doing a whole lot on anything necessarily like, grassroots or hands-on in the community in Fort Lauderdale specifically. So that was one of my biggest goals, was to start just doing things. And so now we have things. If people want to help, we want them to be part of it.
Yeah, no, that's outstanding. And another thing too, I want to bring up, not to bring up politics in this like too much, but I just want to say one thing about it. I want to dispel the rumor that, the conservative mindset is a wasteful one, right? Because it's not at all. It's a responsible one, I think, right? And this is what, your modern conservatism is doing for the state of Florida right now. Whether it's you and me, DeSantis, Brian Mast, right? Others in play that don't want their names mentioned on the podcast today, right?
Yep.
This is what we're doing.
Yep.
All right? We're preserving it and not wasting it, and we're doing it for grassroots funding and grassroots efforts and rolling up your sleeves and just getting it done, getting involved in the community. So if you're out there listening to this, or if you're watching this show, get involved and do something about it. Don't just talk about it like Mike was saying, like on Facebook. Don't be a keyboard warrior. All right? Get off your ass and help, okay? Because it isn't going away, right? Fort Lauderdale, Miami are proving that right now. Other towns around the state are going to start proving that as their sewer lines start popping. Get off your ass and help. Now, contact the CCA, contact Mike, get involved with your local officials. There's things you can do. There's plenty of programs out there, and plenty of things happening while you're going home every night and just watching Netflix. That's my piece. That I'm going to say about that.
You know, to your point, there's nothing more bipartisan than environment, than waterways.
That's it.
You'd be amazed. There's nothing more environmental.
It doesn't have to be a political line.
No, it's
right?
not. It's not.
That's why I wanted. That's the reason I brought up the politics part of it, is just so like maybe the other side of the aisle can realize that, hey, we're not so bad. You know what I mean? And maybe if we do come together, the other side's going to realize like, hey, you're not so bad either. Maybe we can find some common ground issues to explore together.
There's a ton of it.
Right? Because right now, you're going home, whether it's Netflix or CNN or Fox News or whatever you want to watch at the end of the night, you know what I mean? That's going to make you mad, right? Because it does. You watch that crap and it starts just making you mad. That's all it does. It's all virtue signaling.
Yeah.
And that's all they do.
Yeah.
Right? So throw all that crap in the garbage, right? And get out and make a difference. That's the only way. Whether you think one race's life matters more than the other, that's up to you. Right? We're not asking about race. We're asking about our land and we're asking about our environment. Vote clean water. Right? Vote with your conscience. That's it. Especially as today is a voting day. Oh no, this won't be. Although this is going to be airing on Friday, but we record on Tuesdays, air on Fridays. But
it's an appropriate conversation any day, especially today.
Right, any day, especially today. So I know I'm going to get out and vote today.
Yep.
Some of you probably know how I'm voting. Some of you don't. Why do I talk politics on the show? I shouldn't do it.
I don't know.
I shouldn't do it. Is there anything else you wanted to go over while you're here?
I think we
covered all the bases.
I think we covered it all. We got through a lot. I'm pretty impressed. I'm looking at this list here that I jotted down some notes, and we were pretty comprehensive. So
all right.
Yeah.
So for those that want to get involved and donate their time or money, where can they go to reach out to you guys? Or
ccaflorida.org is a great start. If you have questions or want to contact me personally, my email, and you want to catch the spelling on this one, is Mike Lambrechts 0, the number 0, at gmail.com. MikeLambrechts, number 0, at gmail.com. As anybody that's emailing me knows, I'm pretty quick on that. So
why the 0?
It was taken.
There's another Mike Lambrechts in the world?
And one was taken too. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to put Mike Lambrechts 2. I'm just going to be 0. I know. It upsets me all the time.
Was M. Lambrechts taken?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. It was
just checking.
I know. It's I could have had last name of Jones. That would have made it easier.
Yeah.
Could have been Mike Jones.
Follow you on social media, right? And at John Wetler. I'm gonna give a shout out to John. You got to see John's photography and film work. It's amazing. If everyone doesn't follow him already, you should.
Thank you.
Yeah. Are there any ads or anything we got to talk about before we leave? We talked about the FFMD.
Yeah.
Right. We got to tell people to go to connectedbywater.com and buy lots of stuff.
Yep.
If you're looking for custom artwork and apparel design and shirts and stuff for your boat, we do all that. Yeah.
Go eat at Papa's.
Go eat at Papa's, right? Papa's Raw Bar. You talked about all the troubles that people are having with COVID. They're coming through with flying colors. Papa Amigos is, I think, the little bumps in the road with the new venture they got going on with Papa Amigos, but they have been circumventing that with a food truck in Old Town Pompano. Everybody knows how we feel about Papa's. They're the best, right? Run by the best people. And in case you didn't know, the sushi menu is called the Connected by Water sushi menu at Papa's.
I don't know why.
Right?
I don't know how you pulled that one off.
So, and then that was a nice surprise that Troy did for us. There is a Takizi roll on there and an OCD roll and a Jumbolissa Sweat Dream roll, they call it. And it's a lot of fun. And the people are great and the food is outstanding. Once again, we'll give another shout out to Joey Accardi and the fine folks at Accardi, Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, Ram. So if you're looking for a vehicle, give them a shout. I love my Ram Rebel. You will too, right?
It's nice.
It thing's beautiful. It drives like a Charger. Nice. Like I'm rolling around town in that thing, and everyone's looking at me like, "Man, that guy looks so cool." I just know they are. Right. So, and more importantly, if you got anything out of this show today, we really hope that you support the CCA. I think we laid out why on this show. So.
And if you guys like beer and you're in Fort Lauderdale,
yes.
a huge CCA supporter and a huge partner of ours locally has been Gulfstream Brewery. Mm-hmm. They are on 13th Street, and they are still open, and they are serving beer, and the beer is phenomenal. We have a beer called the JMB Reef Ale, and it is they call it a summer ale, and essentially it's a very drinkable, little higher alcohol content ale. One of my favorite beers there. We're actually one of the best-selling beers there. Just wonderful people, big supporters. So if you guys are into beer, Gulfstream Brewing.
Absolutely. Gulfstream Brewing. Anyone else you want to plug here today? Jeff Maggio.
Jeff. I mean, how many times have we plugged that guy today?
Right.
You know, but he deserves it.
Jeff, you owe me $5. So, all right, cool. Mike, thank you so much for coming today.
Thanks for having me.
And we'll have you soon. Again, please.
We'll do it again soon.
Be a regular on the show.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right, your ego is not your amigo. Always do your best and let God do the rest. Always buy all your vehicles from Joey Accardi. Always eat your dinners at Papa's Raw Bar, right? No matter where we are, no matter what we're doing, we're always connected by water. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.